guys, it's Justin with Dirt Time Adventures. Thanks for tuning in with me for another episode. Hey, I am starting a new series called Pathfinder Phase 1, where I'm going to be taking my adventure and my experience through the Pathfinder Phase 1 system and shooting it in a series. And plan on bringing you guys along for my journey. A lot of these things that are on here I've done before, but it's still always a new exciting adventure to be able to just relearn these skills and reapply them. Phase 1 starts off with Block 1, which covers your 10-piece kit. We're going to be talking about my kit, the reason I chose it, and then we're also going to be comparing it to some of the forefathers of bushcraft and survival. And so be sure to stick along with me, guys. I'll give you an up-close shot of my kit, and then I'll talk you through it as well. So let's go over priorities. And so I want to start off, I'm going to be using a basic, it's a military style sack, very similar to a haversack. And so that's what I'm going to be using for my cargo to put my 10-piece kit in. Which brings me to my kit. And so I chose this kit very specifically, not as something that I would probably choose personally on an outing, but I chose this kit because it would be, what are you doing? You're messing up my video. Come here. So I chose my kit based off of how I'm going to succeed in the Pathfinder system. And so, fix my tarp here for my silly dog. Bailey. So this kit, each of these items are going to help assist me in completing each of the blocks to the Phase 1 system. So as I announce these, I want to go over the priority in which I chose these items as well. And so my first and most important tool, and I don't think anybody would argue with me, is going to be my cutting tool, my knife. And I chose because I'm doing the Pathfinder system, I chose a Pathfinder trade knife. And so that's what I've decided to go with. So that would be my first and most important item. The second most important item, I would have to say, would be combustion. And so I'm going to be bringing on my little fire kit, and it's got some flint and steel in it. It's got some tinder, and then the most important item in here is my ferro rod, which is covered in cedar bark. And so that would be my second most important item, would be my fire kit. And I take that with me. My third and fourth items, and I'm really toss up. They really tie for third and fourth because I really couldn't choose between the two, deciding the matter of most importance. But I have my canteen. It's a clean canteen. I went with a small one to keep the weight down, and also because mainly most of my trips with this are going to be day trips. Otherwise, I would probably be going with a 32 ounce. Also, cordage, going with a very simple bank line. Going to be using a lot of orange because I'm going to be getting my son involved with this series too. He's really excited about getting involved with this, and so you guys will get to meet Caleb. And so that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. A knife, combustion kit and fire kit, container and cordage. And these aren't anything new to you guys. You know that these are probably your priority as well. And then my fifth priority would be my tarp, my cover. And the reason those are so important in that you make those your priority is because those are also your priority in survival. That you have shelter, that you have water, that you have fire, that you have food. And a knife is going to be the most important thing in contributing to all those areas. That leaves the other miscellaneous 5 things that I chose. Now, I could probably get away with any of these 5 things for this challenge, but because parts of the blocks require navigation and night exercises, I've added these other elements. But if I was to go down into 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, I would probably go 6 would be my headlamp. 7 would probably be my Baco Laplander saw. 8 would probably be duct tape because you can use it for everything. 9 would probably be my my cloth, my bandana. I always have 2 of them with me. And char cloth, you can use it for first aid, so many different elements. And I'll probably talk a little bit about 3 uses for each here in just a second. And then finally, my compass. Now, I don't have a real fancy compass because I've never been a compass guy, but it is important that I begin to learn a little bit more and enhance my skills in that area of navigation. So that's my 10-piece kit, guys. And part of the exercise is to share 3 uses for each of the items. And I'm not going to do that for every item because I think it's important that you do your own research instead of just watching mine. And but I am going to share 3 uses for a couple of the items. And then I also want to talk about them in correlation to our forefathers and those who've gone before us. Well, hey guys, part of phase 1, block 1, is an exercise that you need to list 3 uses for each of the items. And like I said, I'm not going to list 3 for each because I want you to really get out there and do some research. It requires some creativity and some thinking. And so I'm going to share 3 uses for, or a couple uses for each of these items that would be fairly easy to come up with, but at the same time be able to share some of the things that I thought of. And so once again, I mentioned earlier, the bandana, the cloth, is really important. I think it's one of the most undervalued pieces of equipment that we carry into the woods. But this simple bandana here can be used for first aid. It can be used for filtering, and it could be used for hygiene. And I'm a big guy, and so I sweat a lot in the woods, and so that's why I usually almost always have 2, one on my head and one to wipe my face. And it's just it's handy to have. Back in the early days, men always carried handkerchiefs, whether it's for blowing their nose or for whatever reasons. This was their EDC. This was their everyday carry back in the day. And so there are numerous uses for this. Duct tape, another one. You know, I can't even begin to list the 1,000,001 uses for this, from making containers to shoes to cordage, you name it, you can use it for any of those things. The container, once again, is great for a couple items. I'm not, like I said, I don't want to get into 3 for each, but you can use it as a container for drinking water. You can also use it for char cloth, and so there are numerous other uses for that as well. My fire kit, just looking at the ferro rod alone, 3 uses for it, and it was a little challenging for me because I wanted to. I seen in the old Pathfinder phase 1 or old Pathfinder phase 1 system before they came out with the new one this year. They said list 3 uses for each of the items except your ferro rod, and so I took that as a challenge to come up with three uses for it. And so here's what I came up with. One, the primary use is combustion to make fire. 2, I wrap mine in electrical tape, and so I can still consider that's part of the kit, part of the combustion tool, and that could be used as a fire extender. And 3, I don't know that it's proven and tested, but I'm pretty sure in a pinch, in an emergency, if I was just throwing something together, I could probably use this as a toggle instead of trying to look for a stick or something, or even a tool to cinch down your cordage if you're trying to do lashings, and you could use this to cinch down your lashings. My only fear was that you might break your primary tool, but you could still get, with a ferro rod this size, you could still use it if you did snap it in half. So those are the 3 things that I came up with for my ferro rod. I wanted to throw that out there. The knife, once again, it can be used for numerous things. Primarily, you're cutting and chopping, and you can use this for striking a ferro rod. You can use it for roughing up bark for tinder. This particular one has a bearing block socket drilled into it, so you could use it for friction fire, and a bow drill. And it just has numerous uses. This one also could be was designed to be able to be lashed and attached to a spear, and so it could be used as a spear tip. And so numerous uses for that. Cordage has 1,001 uses. You can use it for first aid. You can use it for binding lashes, knots. You can use it to build your shelters. You can use it for fishing. And so numerous uses. And a couple, once again, I came up with 3, but I'm really only going to share 2 with my headlamp. One is, most importantly, main function is light. And 2, this band here is so springy that it really could be used for a tourniquet. And one I just now thought of would be even maybe possibly for slingshot straps. And so very possible. And so that you actually got 3 after all, because that wasn't one I was thinking of. You guys stick with me. I'm gonna take a walk for a second, and then I want to sit down and close this video out with the forefathers of bushcraft and the pioneers, the guys who've come before us and blazed the trail for us to be where we're at today, and how the equipment that we use today reflects the equipment that they used back in the day. So stick with me. Here, bring it back. Alright guys, so like I said, I want to talk about some of the forefathers that have come before us. And the 3 we're going to be looking at is Otzi the Iceman. We're going to be looking at Washington Sears the Nessmuk, and we're also going to be looking at the 18th century long hunter. Now, I did a lot of research on them, and there's not a lot of time to shoot enough video to cover everything that I researched. But you will find that each of those 3 individuals, the Iceman, Otzi, and Nessmuk, and the 18th century long hunter, all carried very similar tools and very similar kit items. And there is actually, each person carried anywhere from 10 to 12 items in their field. We have Otzi the Iceman. He carried a neat knife that he had flint napped. He also had flint napping tools with him. We don't see that so often in the others, but he also had a bow and arrow, and he had a fire kit. He had loincloth and covering. He had and you can also find in Nessmuk, in reading some of his books, the material and the tools and the kits that he carried. And he carried a lot of very pioneer type tools. He carried a knife. He carried a hatchet, and instead of an axe, he carried a hatchet type system. He carried a pocket knife. He carried a fixed blade knife. The 3 tools that he's most notorious for is his hatchet, his fixed blade knife, and his pocket knife. Those are 3 primary tools that he carried. But he also carried a cook kit. He carried a tarp. He carried a fishing kit. And he was also notorious for carrying a muzzle loader. And so he carried a lot of different tools. He carried cordage as well. And those are some of the same items that I want to be talking about and correlating to what I'm going to be using during this Pathfinder Phase 1. The long hunter, the 18th century long hunter, actually carried probably some of the most equipment, because they would use horses to carry a lot of their equipment. Also, you will find that certain items were issued to the 18th century long hunter that might have been issued to 4 men. For instance, a cook kit would probably not have been issued to just 1 man. It probably was issued to 4 men. And different items like that. A cover shelter was probably issued to 2 men. And so they were able to carry a lot more gear because they were able to distribute it amongst horses and other men. And so those are a lot of the items that they were able to carry because of that. And you know, Nessmuk, he used probably a canoe to haul a lot of his gear as well. And so I want to clearly and quickly go over some of the kit items and how they relate to those of Nessmuk, Otzi, and the 18th century long hunter. The first one is a knife. And so Each of them carried a knife. Nessmuk is notorious for his Nessmuk knife. I even have a condor version of it with the little hump back in it. Otzi carried a stone knife that was kind of pointed like an arrow, a spearhead, and a spear point. And the long hunters, from what I've researched, and a lot of this is based off of research, so I could be wrong, but this is what I've researched, is they carried more of a butcher style knife, and so kind of like an old hickory probably. And so they all carried a knife, a cutting tool, and because it was so important. They also all used cargo. They used a pack. Otzi the Iceman actually had like a pack frame when they found him, and birch bark packs that looked like he carried his equipment in, and hide packs, and that many people believe that he carried. The Nessmuk, he carried, I think he called it a ditty bag, and so he used that to carry all of his stuff. And the 18th century long hunter used actually a haversack, something very similar to this. And so those are each of the items that those guys carried. They also carried containers, probably not stainless steel. I think Otzi had a birch bark container that looked to have been a water container. We had Nessmuk, I believe it was Nessmuk in my studies. I'm having to do a lot of this from memory. He used an oil skin to hold his water, and he probably also had some type of steel or stainless steel canteen. And then the 18th century long hunter also carried a canteen and a water. And most of those guys also carried the cook kits, especially Nessmuk and the 18th century long hunter. They each had cordage. Very similar in cordage from the 18th century to Nessmuk. Very similar, different types of cordages. But Otzi, the cordage that was found on him was hide cordage, where he had cut strips of leather hides, probably deer hides, elk hides, bison hides, mammoth hides. And so he would cut these hides into strips, and he had actually put different things on those. Each of them carried a fire kit. Otzi had a very primitive, probably a stick and hand drill method. I didn't get to do a lot of research on that, but they did say he had a fire kit with him. I'll have to do a little bit more research on that as well. We also know that Nessmuk and 18th century long hunters carried a lot of them carried flint and steel. It was very common for them to find flint in their areas, and especially for Nessmuk traveling on the Adriatic, probably butchering the name of that, Adriatic River, and had flint everywhere, and so was able to use flint and steel or chert of some type. And so they carried fire kits. And last but not least, once again, I've chosen a saw, but they carried a similar tool. And once again, the Iceman, Otzi, carried an axe. Nessmuk carried a hatchet. And the 18th century long hunter, from what I've studied and researched, says that they carried either two items. They either carried a traditional axe, something like you would see today, or they carried more of a tomahawk style that they would carry on their belt. And so those are each of the similarities. And I believe truly the reason that they carried those same items and the items that you see here today is because they are some of the hardest to recreate, if not impossible to create, in the woods. Sure, I can flint knap a blade, but that sucker's going to be dull, and I'm going to have to resharpen it and do it all over again in a matter of 3 or 4 uses. Sure, I can fire ember a container and make it work, but just to think that all I got to do is carry this little bitty light container, and that saves me hours and hours of work. And just the necessity to carry these items is so important for not only enjoyment in the woods, but also for your survivability. I can do a bow drill kit, but it takes me forever. Some guys can bust it out quickly, but it does take me a little while. but also it's not a 100% thing. I tried and tried and tried the other day with some cedar, and all I kept getting was a fluff and not enough powder. And so each of the wood has to be a certain condition before it works. Whereas if you would carry a simple kit, this one can't be more than 18 inches by 18 inches, into the woods, and probably weighs less than 6-7 pounds, then, you know, take a good kit with you, guys. It not only will it contribute to the enjoyment and the pleasure factor of being in the outdoors, but it will also significantly raise your chances of survival in the event of an emergency. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in for Pathfinder Phase 1 with me here at Dirt Time Adventures. I really hope you guys share and subscribe my video. I look forward to shooting the rest of them with you over the coming weeks. And just ask that once again you get out there and get out in the outdoors and have your own adventures, and use this as a catalyst to get you in the outdoors and to take others with you. So once again, I want to thank all my friends and family and everybody who supports what I'm doing here. I look forward to being back real soon, guys. Share and subscribe.